Welcome to Sex Talk with Natasha, everybody. We are excited to have you. It's Wednesday night, 10 p.m. my time. So that's when we talk sex, and we have a great topic tonight. We're excited to talk about moving beyond the missionary position. So that'll be a fun topic. And we've got a great guest with us tonight. Before I turn it over to Ashley, I just want to remind you all that I'm really excited to be providing this service. I hope that it's a cost-effective way to have an ongoing journey with your sexuality. I believe strongly that it's something that we should be kind of tweaking and thinking about and moving forward with every single day, and not just leave it to chance to have a great sex life. So just like with most other things in life, it takes a little bit of intentionality. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, the producer, to tell us a little bit more about the show.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. And for those that are just joining for the first time, we want to first off welcome for the first time. I think we actually do have some new faces on. And for just to give you an idea of how the next hour is going to go, we're going to have Natasha give us a good 20 minutes of education on the topic. And then we have a great guest that we're going to bring on, and she'll be with us for about 20 minutes. And then the last 20 minutes, we leave it open to questions from you guys. This is something that we want to do for you. And so we want to make sure that you get out of it what you can. So please go ahead and send us your questions. Natasha will answer them. She does a great job all the time. We'll do the first half an hour for free here on Facebook. So those on Facebook, check it out. And then the last half an hour, we go ahead and stream the rest over at Patreon. It's patreon.com/sextalkwithnatasha. And there you can subscribe and get a whole bunch of perks. Like Natasha said, this is all about intentionality. And what we try to do here at Sex Talk with Natasha is to provide a cost-effective way for you guys to get started and to have access to a sex therapist. We do these weekly live Q&As. Natasha does weekly blog posts. She does multiple posts throughout the week. She just finished, or are you still doing the series on how to overcome sexual shame?
Well, I'm not sure that's a series. I think that's an ongoing.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
An ongoing thing. But right now we've got some daily actions that are really specific on accepting your body. So that's really exciting for me to offer those. So yeah, it's all about sexual healing, baby.
Yep, and I actually have already gotten feedback from some of our patrons that it's been really, really resourceful for them. So please go check it out. It's really helpful. Again, patreon.com/sextalkwithnatasha. As always, if you guys want to see Natasha professionally, you can always visit her online practice that's called Symmetry Solutions, and you can find that at symmetrysouls.com. So without further ado, I'm going to throw it back over to Natasha and we'll get started.
Great. And I just want to remind everybody as well that we have, 3 days left in March, I think?
Yes.
So we have a giveaway where we're going to be giving away the book Beyond Clitorate, which is a fabulous resource, great for both men and women to understand female arousal and female desire and female orgasm. So really excited to be able to give away that book. So anybody who's subscribed before the end of March will be put into a drawing for that. So make sure you try to do that today. All right, without further ado, let's get talking about one of my favorite topics, actually. So, it's interesting how, I don't know where it got so popular that missionary style sex is kind of like the sex to, do. Like that's the most common position. And I'm not even sure that's really actually statistically true that that's the most common position, but for some reason it seems to be like the position that most people get explained about sexuality. Like that's having sex, right? It's man on top of woman, penis inside a vagina. And this is what we call missionary style position. So, and unfortunately, a lot of people have grown up in cultures, whether religious or familial or ethnic or even certain governments, where, any other type of sex is seen as subpar, or not correct, or maybe morally suspect. And so some people have a lot of hangups on being able to diversify from this one position. And the sad part about missionary style sex is that it's not really the most reliable way to get a woman to orgasm. So it's really kind of a problem for a lot of female pleasure if that's kind of the only way that you're used to having a sexual encounter. And I get many, many women who are complaining and wanting to figure out, how do I have an orgasm in this particular way? And for some women, whether it's your clitoris is not, we all have different measurements between our clitoris and our vaginal opening. And there's some research to show that depending where your clitoris is, it's more difficult for you to be able to have an orgasm in that position. It also is not a position where the male thrusting into the vagina is having that much contact with the clitoris. So again, it's just not the most reliable way to orgasm. So let's talk a little bit about why sexual diversity might be important. And this is where I'm going to get kind of into my bulleted points, right? This is how I organize my thoughts for the few minutes I have with you. So a lot of people, I think, are under the impression that if we have more sex, we'll be happier. And this actually is a big myth. It's really more the quality of sex that you're having. And frequency does not necessarily have anything to do with quality. And what we know about long-term partnerships that state that they are more content than others is that there's usually more diversity with the sexual lifestyle. Now, it doesn't mean that's always the case, but in general, that's what statistics show. And this also aligns with the sexual research here currently that we have, where we're really finding out that in long-term relationships in particular, it is important to have some mystery, some excitement, something to look forward to, because what long-term relationships offer is a lot of stability, not a lot of mystery. And for erotic desire and for passion and for healthy sexuality that's exciting, we need both. We need a good mix of those two things. So so we want something other than a routine, which can lack of motivational pleasure if it's just routine and feels kind of boring, or you kind of know what's coming. You want to have something to mix it up. So my number 2 point is, what is your motivation? If this is something that feels important to you, well, why? What's the motivation? Because I think it's a different motivation if you are bored or if you are wanting something different, versus the motivation being, I should want something different. Everybody seems to be reading Cosmo or having 10 different ways to give oral sex, or all the lists that are out there. And so now I'm feeling inadequate. And even though I'm pretty satisfied with my vanilla missionary style position sex or whatever it is that you're doing, then I feel some shame or some, like, I should want something else. So that's not the best motivation. I think it's a better motivation when it's coming from more of an authentic space. Like, yeah, I'm curious. I'd like to explore something different. Okay, so number 3 bullet point is take small steps, because I think that there's so much, for a culture that doesn't talk about sex at all, there's a lot of sexual information out there, right? And there's a lot of sexual positions and all these, 7 ways to do this, 7 ways to give your man a hand job, 7 ways to do that. It can be a little bit overwhelming. And specifically when things are maybe more advanced, like BDSM play and things that you might see, you're like, holy cow, how am I ever gonna get there, versus where I am now. So diversifying can be something that you have a lot of fun with, and it can be very small steps towards something different than what you're currently doing. So don't allow for, the course 405 to intimidate you from taking the course 103, right? If we're going to make the metaphor of college classes. Number 4 point that I want to talk about is understand the role of discomfort. Many of us who come from religious backgrounds, for example, discomfort has been tied to something naughty or evil or bad. And so if I'm uncomfortable with it, I shouldn't be doing it. And sometimes discomfort is guilt or shame about wanting to do certain things. So I want everybody to understand that anytime you do anything new, you're going to be uncomfortable. For any of you who started a new day in a new school, you were uncomfortable. That had nothing to do with anything that you were doing wrong. I usually like to give the example that the first time I thought about French kissing seemed pretty gross. I think the first time I did it, it was kind of gross. But, you know, after a few times, after a few different partners, I had a very different idea about French kissing, and I was no longer uncomfortable with that type of behavior. So there is something about allowing yourself the time to decide whether or not you are going to be comfortable with a new technique. So I usually try to tell people, even if you don't particularly like it the first time, you know, try it 2 to 5 times and see if any of that kind of, if you get used to it, or if you learn how to have pleasure with it, kind of like an acquired taste. Most of us don't like beer the first time we taste it, but after a while, a lot of people do like it. So think of it from that perspective. My number 5 bullet point is to really take a mindful approach to diversity, that this really isn't about having success or failure. Like, oh my gosh, we tried that and we totally were lame at it and it all went wrong. And I can't believe we even did that. And now we're embarrassed. That's not the right way to approach this. It's a better way to just say, hey, let's try this out. If we like it, if we don't like it, what we're really doing is we're gathering information, you know, so all of this information about how we feel, whether or not it went well, whether or not we enjoyed it, that's all information that will help us continue to make decisions about what we want to try moving forward. So, you know, just think about mindfulness from that perspective. Another thing to think about with mindfulness is, again, you have those voices in your head, you know, the guilty voice, the shaming voice, or the little angel and devil on the shoulder, however you want to think about that. And sometimes it can be okay to acknowledge the little voices, and it can also be okay to imagine flicking them away so that they're not bothering you and interrupting your play when, you know, you're wanting to be thinking about other things. So there's lots of little strategies that you can do to help your cognitions not necessarily run the show. Another thing that I'll say about success versus failure is a helpful metaphor is that of trying a new food. You know, like if you travel to a new land, you might have tried a new food that you've never tried before. And you wouldn't necessarily say, oh my gosh, what a failure that I tried that food because I didn't like it. You would say, well, I'm proud of myself. You know, I tried something different. It ended up not being something I enjoy. I probably will never have that again. But I'm proud that I at least was willing to be courageous and be brave and do that. Now, if you end up liking it, wow, you know, here's something that I would have totally missed out on if I had never been willing to try it. So, you know, that might be another helpful metaphor in that regard. My number 6 point is keeping expectations realistic. So again, sometimes people who come in and they decide, yeah, we're going to diversify, they get all excited and they're like, every single time now is going to be phenomenal. Maybe they have a really great experience and now they think every single time has to be huge and monumental and fireworks and all of those things. And the reality is that there's nothing wrong with vanilla sex. Again, like I said, there's nothing incorrect about having these routines or these ways that you kind of enjoy having sexuality together. So maybe the diversity part is just a small percentage of what you're doing. And even then, whether it's vanilla or more fringe type of things that you're doing, I think it's Barry McCarthy's work that talks about, you know, couples who say that they're satisfied with their sex life will generally say, and I might get these stats a little bit wrong, but it's about 60% of their sex life is good sex, right? About 10% of it kind of just sucks. And the rest of it is kind of like humdrum, you know, like, or maybe it didn't work that time or whatever. So even, you know, couples who are satisfied with their sexual lives have a lot of flexibility about their expectations. And so I think that's really important when you're thinking about diversifying. Number 7 point, and my last point, is being able to laugh at yourself, being able to have a sense of humor. You know, if you're trying a new toy and all of a sudden, you know, it slips and things kind of go awry, or you're using the lube wrong, or you're like, you know, all of a sudden your vagina makes a farting noise that you didn't expect. I mean, all these things that we can get so uptight about. You know, we can laugh, we can giggle, we can smile at each other, we can say, well, you know, maybe this killed the mood for this one time. Maybe it's just something we can have fun with and keep going. We can, again, use humor to really help us as we try new things. Now, I just wanted to list off some ideas that might be things that you might want to try. Sometimes people are like, well, what do you mean by diversifying? And what kinds of things are out there? You know, there's 5 bajillion things out there that you can do sexually, but here's a little list of things that you might think about. One very easy thing to do is role playing. This is just figuring out things that turn you on. I think it's the Married with Children, no, not Married with Children, the Modern Family show, right? That has the mom and dad of all the kids, and they go off every month or every few months and they pretend that they just met at the bar and they pick each other up, and it's kind of this fun scene, you know, about how they do that. So if you've never had a one night stand and you're thinking that might have been a fun thing to do, pretend to have one, right? Or if you want to pretend that you're, who knows, doing all kinds of things, there's all kinds of fun things that you can do in the role of fantasy, and so that's a fun way to play. Dress up is a great way to start. So whether you're using negligees if you're a female, or fun stockings, or if you're a male and using certain underwear, or what are those things, suspenders? There's all kinds of, you can go all out and get costumes. There's all kinds of fun things that you can do with dress up. Of course, there's sex toys galore, and sometimes it can be very intimidating because there are so many options. But starting out with like a bullet vibrator, or a cock ring, or something, you know, that's somewhat not huge or intimidating, but that can be fun. You know, you can add to your sex toy box along the way. Understanding that there might be some sex toys that you purchase that end up not working, and they're not usually returnable. So it's okay. Just expect that to be part of the cost, like going to a bad movie, you know, you just kind of wasted $20. That's all right. The Kama Sutra is a great, you know, book that comes in its very traditional, you know, Asian form. It also has been, you know, kind of replicated in many other ways. There's the book called The Joy of Sex, which is similar as far as like helping you understand different positions you might want to try. Some of them you need a lot of yoga to try, and I don't necessarily recommend. At the same time, there are some really nice things that you might have been like, I would have never thought of that. And that might actually feel really good to try that. So that's another suggestion. Trying to have sex somewhere other than your bedroom or wherever you typically have sex. So whether it's, you know, on the classic on the kitchen table, or outside somewhere, or in the car, or, you know, just kind of diversifying where you have sex and even what time of day you have sex. Again, many of us tend to have sex, you know, at night when you go to bed together. We're usually exhausted by that time. It's not actually the best time to have sex. So choose other times, you know, your lunchtime or in the morning. Go off and do something together when you're more energized. I would, you know, always encourage you, if you see my daily actions, I'm big on senses. So using your senses for different options. So for example, you know, touch. Well, you could use different lotions. There's like heated massage oils. There's actual like lotions that actually will kind of give you the tingles. There's of course things that you can do with binding your hands. So different, you know, touch types of things where you maybe even bind the eyes, you know, so getting into some of the BDSM play, which is fun for a lot of people. Music is a great, so, you know, your sense of hearing. So having a music playlist, maybe sometimes getting a little raunchier with the playlist as far as, you know, fun kind of thrusting type sex, you know, music. Maybe some Latin music that gets your hips moving a certain way. So it can be really fun to play with what types of music you like or that turn you on. Taste is another one, whether, you know, the classic whipped cream and strawberries that people will, you know, lather on the body or put on a nipple or something like that. But there's even like like taste, I don't know if you know those mint things that people put on their mouth, kind of like a breath saver. Well, they have things like that, but that are for oral sex. So some people are sensitive to oral sex. So you can put like a chocolate or banana or strawberry thing on your tongue and then go down on your partner and enjoy the taste of something that is other than human skin, if that's helpful to you. And the last tip I have is just kind of maybe even using some naughty words. So talking to each other in ways that you wouldn't normally talk to each other can be arousing for a lot of people. So anyway, those are just some basic ideas. I could have listed 50 other ones. These are just things that I pulled out of my hat. The yes, no, maybe exercise is a great way to start with the diversity ideas. And what that means is you can either do this on your own or there's lists online, and I'll link to some of those on the resource page for those of you who are subscribers. But you can think of everything that people do sexually and write it down on a list. And then you both kind of say, well, yeah, that sounds like something I'm interested in, or I know I'm interested in that. The maybe is like, I don't know, maybe I'd be willing to try that and see what works. And the no is like, hell to the no. Glad that other people like to do that, but I'm not interested, and I know I would never want to try that. So then that gives you kind of an idea of you and your partner's tastes and preferences that you can start thinking about. And remember that a list like that should always be considered fluid, because what you like today may not be what you liked 10 years ago. What you don't like today may be something you're very open to 10 years from now. So those are my tips about diversifying your sex life. And love to get to the guest now. So Ashley, you want to take over?
Yeah, so thank you for that. I'm gonna, just for everybody that's watching on Facebook and then also on Patreon, the different diversifying ideas that Natasha suggested, I'm gonna throw them on the comments, so if that's helpful for everybody. But we're excited to have our guest today. And I'm just gonna go ahead and throw it over to her, and we're gonna go ahead and have her introduce herself. And just remember, everybody on Facebook, that in about 10 minutes or so, we're gonna cut the feed. So for those that want to continue watching with us and finding out more about our guest story, as well as listening to the questions at the end, go ahead and become a subscriber. Just head over to patreon.com/sextalkwithnatasha. So moving forward, here we go. I'm gonna go ahead and pull in our guest. Let's see, I'm gonna just unmute her here. Oops, I accidentally muted. Are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome. All right, do you wanna just go ahead and just introduce yourself and kind of share your story?
Sure. So I have been married for almost 13 years. It'll be 13 next month. And my husband and I both grew up in very conservative religious households where sex was taught that it was something that was definitely reserved for marriage, but also kind of just that it's bad, don't do it. And so when we got married, it was really kind of tricky for us at first to just realize that it's okay now. Like, this is okay. We're married. But we kind of found our rhythm as newlyweds, but very quickly became pregnant. And that totally changed our entire sex life. And then when my daughter was 18 months old, got pregnant again. And so the first few years of kind of developing what sex looked like for us was really just different. And we didn't really have time to try anything fun. It was just kind of like meet basic needs and done, and that's it. And so now we're at a stage in our life where we are thinking more about past just needs and into what does it look like. We want to develop an actual sex life for us that is something we have decided on and is exciting and something we look forward to. And so I've been watching this podcast, trying to kind of glean information. And because, as I think I said in my message to you before, it's kind of tricky to just go on Google and say, how do you spice up your sex life? You get a lot of good information and a lot of not great information. And it can be kind of scary to just jump into that.
Sure, for sure. Great. So thank you for giving us that background. That paints a really good picture, and I think that's a very common story. And in fact, some shows that we definitely want to have on the show, Ashley, take note, is dealing with sexuality around pregnancy, right? So both pregnancy sex, postpartum sex, right? And like you're saying, Mary, it really changes the game for especially the woman, but for the couple in general. So so let me ask, how many years are you post children, post baby making?
So I have a 9 and 12-year-old.
Okay.
So it's been a while.
Okay, good. Because it takes about 2 to 3 years for a woman to recover from, having children, as far as, and especially in kind of the sexual realm. And some women just describe it that it never quite goes back to exactly the way it was pre-children, as far as maybe libido shifts or different ways to orgasm, etc. So I think that that's something that we all deal with, and we can either grieve or celebrate or both, depending on the situation. But I think it's important to have a lot of self-compassion in that regard, as far as what children do to our sex lives. And it's not always super great, although we love them. So tell me a little bit about what particular questions you have. What kinds of challenges have you tried a few things? Have you been successful? Are you kind of starting from zero? What types of questions do you have for me in regards to this particular topic?
So we are kind of starting from zero, which has been exciting, because it almost feels like we're newlyweds again, and we're like, okay, what do we want to try? Like, let's try something different. But also very awkward, and very much like that first time. We did recently purchase a vibrator, and that was something growing up that I was taught was like bad. Don't use those. And so I felt even a little bit like, oh my gosh, I'm buying this online and whatever. And but that actually turned out to be something that was really good for me to have as part of our sex routine. It was super awkward the first couple of times we tried to incorporate it. We didn't even know how. Like, well, it came in the mail. Now what? What do we do? There's no instruction manual with it of here's what to try. So it was kind of just try this. Well, do we like this? And but it was really good for me because, as you were explaining earlier, missionary style for me does not work for orgasm. And so most of my marriage, I'd never experienced that. And it wasn't that I didn't know what that was. I totally knew what it was. And I felt like maybe there was something wrong with me, or we weren't doing it right. And so I did feel like I was missing out on that part of my own sexual fulfillment. And this definitely helped with that problem.
Absolutely. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear.
But now it's kind of taking it. I know, it really was. It was a really exciting thing for me. But now it's kind of like, okay, well, what's the next step? What's the next? That was such a huge thing for us to try that we're not quite sure what's the next thing we should try.
Yeah. And that's interesting because, well, and maybe taking the word should out of that sentence might be a good idea, because it's more like, what's the next thing we can try, right? Or could try, or interested in trying. There's so many aspects of that story that I loved, in the sense of, like you said, your awkwardness, and it just is so tragic to me that you went so many years, just assuming this was, again, the right type of sex, and that there was something wrong with you, that somehow I'm broken because I don't reach orgasm in this particular way. It's usually also very painful for the husband, who feels like he's doing something wrong, like, I must not be a good lover. I must not know how to get her to orgasm in this way. And it's just tragic for both of you. So getting a little vibrator, now there's clitoral stimulation. Some women, have different sensibilities to their clitoris. So for some women, they need quite a bit of stimulation to get going at that level of being able to reach orgasm. For some women, it's not as much stimulation. Some women like direct, some women like indirect stimulation. So these are all things that with a vibrator or digitally, you can be exploring and having a lot of fun with. And so, and I think sometimes too, from that religious or more conservative background, toys have been seen as a threat, like somehow this is replacing the man or the penis, or there's a lot of angst or anxiety that this is a bad thing because it's not natural, or it doesn't help with the bonding of the actual couple. And it's actually the reverse. Like when a couple can use toys and things that will help them experience this type of pleasure, it actually increases bonding. So anyway, what it really comes down to is it doesn't make babies. Vibrators don't make babies. And so I think that's where the shame comes from with a lot of cultural history and baggage on controlling baby making, and sexuality. But the reality is most of us don't want to be baby making all the time. So we want to be just having a lot of fun. So I love that. So, maybe I think a good place to go next is maybe just be thinking about, well, what types of erotic things do we think about? That might be one area you can go next. And this is an area where many people, especially coming from conservative backgrounds, haven't either given themselves permission to even think about. Like I hear a lot of women that are like, I don't know what I fantasize about, when I ask them, what do you fantasize about? Or they've hidden it. They know what they fantasize about, but they feel guilty about it. And so they just don't talk about it with their partners. So that might be an area that's fun to explore. Like I said, another fun thing to explore is just simple things like lotions and oils and taste things or music, so I don't know if any of that, when I was going down the list, if there was anything that kind of piqued your curiosity or your interest.
Yeah, there was definitely, music is a big one for me. I have a hard time kind of turning off like the mommy brain at the end of the day. And so going from, all right, we put the kids to bed, okay, now let's go have sex, is really hard for me. And so music helps, and some other things you listed, just kind of getting in that mindset, even like gentle massage, just that non-sexual touching to kind of just get my body in that mindset of, okay, this is partner time. Now this is our time together. It would be really helpful because that is such a switch. I think for a lot of women, it's kind of, our minds are running a million miles a minute with what we need to do tomorrow. And how do we like turn that off and just be in the mood, especially at the end of the day?
Yeah, I have some suggestions about that. And I also wanted to ask you a question about whether or not you notice that even though you've moved intellectually away from maybe feeling guilty, if you still find that there's issues that kind of keep you kind of, oh, I don't know if I should be doing this, but I know that it's time to kind of switch over. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Ashley, do you want to take it over for a minute?
I do. I was gonna interrupt here just a second anyway, so it's good timing. Everybody on Facebook, thank you so much for joining. We're gonna go ahead and cut the Facebook feed off now. We're still going over on Patreon. So head over to patreon.com/sextalkwithnatasha. Hope to see you there. We're gonna be going for at least another half hour. So please join us. Make sure that you subscribe so that you guys can get entered into winning the book. What is it called again, Natasha?
It's Becoming Clitorate.
Becoming Clitorate. I had it up and then I froze. I froze on the title. Becoming Clitorate, you get to automatically be entered for anybody that subscribes by the end of the month. So go check it out. It's gonna be awesome. Thank you all, Facebook, for joining. It's always fun to be on there. So
thank you, Facebook. We will see you next week.